Greetings. My name is Jason Dunn, CEO of the National Coalition of Black Community Professionals, and I greet you in the spirit of our chairman, Nicholas Wiggins, and the founders of NCBNP and our board members. Thank you for attending the final session of our Financial Fluency webinar series. This has been a fantastic series for each of us to really learn how to operate within a space of revenue, how to forecast using visualization and technology to ensure that we're being efficient, effective, and most importantly, productive. With that being said, please welcome our sponsor for these three sessions, Ms. Pamela Haley, the Director of Sales from Meet Chicago Northwest, who has a small presentation for you. Ms. Pam.
Thank you so much, Jason. As he said, this is the last series, but it's been fantastic. I was sharing with Jason that the level of speakers and the quality of the information has been fabulous. So not only am I a sponsor, I'm taking notes and sharing everything with my team. So Meet Chicago Northwest is a convention visitor bureau on the northwest suburbs of Chicago, 15 minutes from the airport of O'Hare Airport, 100,000 square foot convention center, free parking all over. For those of you who have been on these series before, you've seen the video. If you have not, allow me just to share a quick snippet of the Northwest and give you an idea of what a meeting might look like in our area.
Discover a hidden gem in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. The perfect place to bring your team and meet your best self. From resort fun to world-class shopping, the options are endless. Where solid business meetings unfold, relationships flourish, and after-hours celebrations begin. Experience the perfect blend of work and family time on your business trip. Enjoy award-winning culinary experiences, create lasting memories, and unwind in style. We're on the edge of Chicago and in the middle of everything. Meet Chicago Northwest.
So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Michael Tatanetti is a certified association executive and certified pricing professional on a mission to advance associations in their pricing models for financial sustainability. As the founder of Pricing for Associations, he and his team work with associations to harmonize pricing and value across membership, education, sponsorship, events, and marketing. Dr. Michael is a proud Association Forum Under 40 honoree for his dedication to the association field and the author of Pricing for Associations, available on Amazon. You can learn more about the work he and his team are doing at www.pricingforassociations.com. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Michael to share some event data analytics for budgeting, forecasting, and revenue optimization.
Yes, thank you for having me, Pam. Thank you for that great introduction. All right, it's great to be here with everyone. So today we're going to be talking through some key performance indicators, things that if I could really highlight would be the most important things. Now, before we dive in, I want to set the stage because part of today's talk is data analytics. However, I'm not going to be showing any specific dashboards. The reason why is because I'm technology agnostic. I don't work for a tech company, so I'm not saying here's what it should look like in promoting that. Instead, I'm saying here are the data points that you should be tracking, however you track them. Whether you have some fancy software, whether you're using Google Sheets or Excel, it doesn't matter. So what I want to share today are what are the data points to look at, what's really going to move the needle for budgeting and for profitability and for optimizing that revenue. So as we dive into today's presentation, I do want to kind of start there so that you know what we're going to dig into. So here are two problems that I see very frequently for events, and it doesn't matter. I focus on associations, but I have friends that work in for-profit meeting planning, all different types, religious, higher ed, etc. The two big problems that I'm seeing are, one, that event costs are skyrocketing, and it is very hard to plan similarly to how we did pre-COVID. But the other thing that I'm seeing is that people are a bit afraid to talk about pricing and raising the price. We get very worried about that. But one thing that's important to me is pricing is not about greed. I don't care if you're a for-profit, nonprofit, what your setup is that you're planning meetings for. It doesn't have to be that way. And for me, when I talk about pricing, it is about financial sustainability, which is why knowing what data to track and what to look at really matters. When I talk about value, I'm really talking about listening to the audience. What is it that they want? At the end of the day, the way that decisions are made on profitability is what are you offering to your audience that they want? And then what are they willing to pay for that? So if we're just sitting around a boardroom and throwing spaghetti at the wall and guessing at what our event attendees want, we're going to miss the mark. On the flip side, if we listen and then figure out what's feasible and then charge accordingly and also ask them their willingness to pay, then we can determine, will this be profitable or not? That's when we can start analyzing our data and making business decisions. So that's what we're going to focus in on today. Now, I'm going to give you three big takeaways. The first one's going to be this example of the impact of pricing, because this usually is a big eye opener. I don't know if anyone is a fan of Simon Sinek. He did a TED Talk and wrote a book called Start With Why. And I'm very big on that. It's kind of, why does this even matter? So before we dive into the other two things, which will be more around what data to look at and how to collect that data and therefore do analytical work, I want to start with why pricing matters and the importance. Now, if we were live as in person, I normally would ask the audience, okay, we're going to talk through a price decrease, which is a discount, and an increase. But before we do, what discount percentage would you give? Now, since we're online, I'm going to tell you what I typically hear, but if you think for a moment, what discount might you give? So let's think an early bird discount or a group rate discount. What I typically hear is at least 10%, upwards of 20, 25, 30, even 50%. So let's look at the impact that can have. Now, we're going to do a generic event, keep the numbers really round, right? I like easy math, even though I'm a pricing person. I like the marketing and the psychology the most over crunching the numbers. So let's say we have a $1,000 event ticket price. What I am seeing across the board right now is that if you have a profit margin of 10% on an in-person event, that's great. Some of them are still hitting maybe 20, 25%, but that's become a lot harder post-COVID. And I'm also seeing a lot of events that are either breaking even or even losing money. And therefore, the strategy becomes that this is a loss leader for the organization, but maybe it's important for engagement. So I'm going to go in the middle and we're going to say a 10% profit margin. If we were conservative with this and even just did a 5% off, so $50 off, that's going to eat into half of our profit margin. If we actually did a 10, 20, 30, we would be losing money in that scenario. That's going to negatively impact. So a lot of times we look at revenue and just go, oh, but if we, give 10% off, but we sell, it wouldn't matter how many more tickets you sell, you would not be making money. Now, of course, there's fixed variable costs, maybe to some very slight degree, but if you're making a couple bucks per person, that's not what you want from your revenue standpoint. Now, on the flip side, let's talk about a slight increase. As we have costs rising, people are saying, well, how do we make more money on our events? Price is going to be that lever. Outside of negotiating your costs and having excellent negotiation skills, the other key thing is going to be raising the price. Now, let's say that we have that same $1,000 product. We're sitting at a 10% profit margin, but maybe our organization is saying, hey, we really want to hit higher. If we went up by 5% on the flip side, went to 1050, most people wouldn't blink their eye at that, maybe even going upwards to 1090, 1099. That, though, would improve our profitability on the flip side by 50%. We would move up to a 15% profit margin. So I always like to start with this because pricing is a really important lever. I think we often think of pricing last. We kind of say, okay, here's the event, here's the meeting space, here's what we're doing. We're doing the same program, we're having the speakers, we're doing all these things. Then when we look at the final itemized cost, we go, oh crap, like our pricing, we're not going to make money. So we need to think about pricing. So here's going to be the two big data components that I give to you as I share over the coming 20 minutes on things that you should be looking at or for data to then create key performance indicators and optimize those. So all we're talking about here is saying what data points should we look at? As we gather them, how do we create metrics or goals or KPIs to monitor? And then as we improve those KPIs, we're optimizing our revenue, we're creating even more revenue for the organization. So the first thing is going to be surveys. Now, this of course goes without fail, but you, whether you're an external meeting planner who is working with an organization or whether you work for the organization that the meeting is being planned for, one of your goals, if it is profitability of the event, you should be asking questions around value. So when we look at price, we have to start with value. We have to look at the value that's being delivered because, again, value is determined in the eye of the beholder, in the customer, not by us. I know I used to work in an association. I know I've had ideas of, hey, let's take like the keynotes, record them, repackage them into membership. Our members always say they'd love to get the keynotes, on demand. We did that without really surveying them, and we had less than 1% of our membership watching it, even though we thought it was a great idea. Sounds like a great idea, and we weren't even selling it. It was for free in their membership. So if you don't ask your members what they need and then get your thumb on the pulse of that, you won't know what you can charge for and where you can raise the price. So there's a few different things. One section for attendees would be their overall event experience. You're probably already doing a post-event survey asking things like this around satisfaction. What do they engage with? How likely are they to come back the following year? But then there's also some quantitative value props that we want to get to. So how do they rate specifically different aspects of the event? How much did they attend? Are the number of days and the number of sessions the right amount, or would they like more or less? One trend that I'm seeing in delivering value at events is people actually want more breathing room at events. They don't want to go from 8 or 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. nonstop, or from 9 to 5 in sessions, plus the networking afterwards. Many of them want some breathing space, which could mean that you do less sessions, have more networking opportunities where people could either come together or go off solo, check email, refresh. One thing I think that happened a lot as well after COVID was people tapped into more of their introverted side and they realized burnout and capacity. So that's important to give people space to breathe. So that's where you can ask some of these types of questions to get a handle on that. Now I'm going to skip ahead to section 4, then go back to 3, but then you could ask more qualitative. So what was in it for them? What was meaningful in the experience? How does it impact what they can do differently at the office or in their personal life, whatever the meeting is, whatever the goal is? And then what improvements would they like to see? You could even ask competitive questions here as well. If you're wondering about competitors, the best way is not to look at their websites because you assume everything they're doing at their event is amazing, but you don't know which aspects are great and which maybe they're flopping unless you go yourself and try to do some sleuthing. One of the best ways is to ask, what other events have you gone to related to this topic or this theme or this event? And what do they do really well that we could learn from them? And then even ask, what do we do really well or where do we shine compared to other events that you've gone to? Again, your audience is really going to tell you if you're valuable or not. So asking them instead of just looking online yourself and assuming they're great, that's going to be much more beneficial. Now I'm going to go back to section 3, which is going to be pricing and value. So this is where you can start asking some specific pricing questions to get an idea against the value of where do you stand? Can you go up? Are they willing to pay more? Or for what would they be willing to pay more? So you could ask questions like, for the value received, how does the price compare to the value received? Now, if you do, let's say, a 5-point scale, I typically like to do a 4-point scale. The reason being I've changed to that over the last year is that removes a neutral stance. So if you do a 5-point or a 3-point, they could do, a negative, 1 to 2, 3 would be neutral, 4 to 5 would be positive. If you just do a 4, it pushes them into negative or positive and helps to me with the data collection. But what you're looking for here, let's say if you're doing a 5-point scale for the value received for the money, you might think that your goal is to get as close to a 5 as possible, but I would actually push that that's not the goal. If they say that the value was absolutely worth the money, for me, that means you're probably underpricing. So if you're doing a 5-point scale, I actually like to see closer to a 4. I like to see some people say, now you're taking this, let me kind of preface really quickly. You're prefacing this against how valuable, how were the outcomes, what was the value of the event, not regarding price. So on this section, you're hopefully seeing that you have excellent scores, excellent metrics. And if not, those become KPIs that you're tracking and trying to improve or maintain. Once you know that they've had a great event with you, then what you're looking for is, okay, but for the price paid, you want it to be like a B on an ABCD scale in a way, if that makes sense. If everybody's saying, yep, it was excellent, it was more than worth the price, you probably could go up in price. So it's not a bad thing. It just tells you your position. On the flip side, of course, if you have a low number, you need to fix the value or you need to possibly decrease the price. I don't like decreasing price. I like fixing value and trying to keep price where it is. But what you want is that little bit of tension where people are saying it was worth it, but it was also a little pricey. Like you kind of want that slight bit of tension. And then you can ask, how did price influence the impact to attend? How likely are you to come back next year? You could even ask, if prices went up by 10%, how likely are you to come back next year? Or these are the prices that we're looking at. You could do like a visual matrix and say, here would be maybe the early bird rate and the regular attendee rate. How likely are you to attend next year? Now, if you do, again, I would anchor that in the quantitative with how likely are you to attend? And then in the pricing, I would ask, if you plan on attending, which one would you pick? Again, that's going to remove, what if they only plan on coming to an event every other year? Like if it's an annual conference, they don't come every year. You don't want to skew the data where you think, oh, they're not picking it. Well, no, they weren't planning on coming anyway. So you might logic flow that. But you can basically ask, or even what's your threshold? When would you not attend? If the price was 5%, 10, 20% more, where does that sit? So you can ask some specific questions around price. And I think that's a great way to gauge a bit. And these are all hypotheticals, right? But it gives you a decent pulse check instead of throwing spaghetti at the wall. Let's see, we got a question. How do you get attendees to actually take the surveys? People give great feedback on site and through social media, but the email surveys are scarce. Okay, Maisha, here's one thing that I do. This does get into ethics slightly, but it's something I did just to help. And it depends. If you have a credit attached, one thing that I would do is say, hey, you get your certificate, but like you've got to complete the survey and then you get the certificate. Now, of course, we give them the certificate, right? So not completely breaking ethics, but usually they didn't care. They weren't like, I don't want to do the survey. But that was one way. If they're not getting a credit or anything, then it's hard to attach it to that. But that, if you think of some incentive like that, now, of course, you could say you're entered into a drawing for this. The other thing to me that works really well is if you do it on site. If you have the survey ready and launch it on like the final day of the event or the second to last day of the event, assuming this is a multi-day event. If it's a one-day event, then you would have to do it that day, maybe launch it at lunchtime. But if you stick the QR code up on the main stage, reiterate it, and possibly even say, hey, if you show that you completed it to our maybe registration desk, or for anyone who does complete it today, then we're going to do a drawing for XYZ. That does help. I will say if it's an association, so if there's an attachment and a relationship beyond just the event, I see that helps. When there is not, so if it's like a solo event or more of a community, then that's where I see even lower response rates. So you may need to incentivize a bit. But those are some quick ideas there. And feel free to ask any questions in the comments as you see fit. I would love to answer them as we go. Now we have sponsor here too. It's basically the same thing, but I reworded for what sponsors are looking for. Now, again, this may or may not be within your domain, but man, like what a great partner if you are, let's say over, sales at a hotel or convention bureau, and you're like, hey, here's a resource to check out. Like, are we directly responsible for your profitability? No. But do we want to make sure that you have it? Yes. So again, we kind of have here similar questions, so I'm not going to be redundant and read through all of them, but what they're looking for is a bit different, but it's the same idea of general feedback, get some quantitative value props from them, get the qualitative and get the pricing. Now, one other thing, this is a marketing tip, but then you can take these and not only have them as data to fuel decisions, but use these for the following year on your sales promo, right? Like literally say here, here's what people are saying, like, here's the qualitative takeaways. This percent of people said that they were able to do something different in their personal life, at work, whatever the outcomes are, the following week by attending this event. That's going to really help drive. That's to me how you create value propositions for the event, is using the voice of the customer. One other thing that I really want to say is always lean into the storytelling. A lot of times we lean into the quantitative value props. So how many sessions are there? If they're getting credits for something or whatever, but we don't always lean enough into the qualitative value props. And that does take storytelling, and you have to capture that. So again, that's asking these things of, what was your experience? How will you do something different? How might it impact outcomes in whatever the case is? So I think that capturing that, you don't have to use their name. Of course, even more advanced is have a videographer on site, have them record testimonials, but even just through the survey, you can at least get some written things. Okay. Let's see here. Love it. We plan community festivals and some cocktail party networking events. Yeah, perfect. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, Maisha, when they're quicker events, it is harder to get survey responses. And I would do a quicker survey. So it might be something as simple as, scale of 1 to 4, how valuable was this? Like, how valuable was this for the time that you spent? Or did you get the outcome that you were looking for? And then maybe what's your, one thing that we did really well that you'd love for us to keep leaning into? And is there one thing that you'd love us to do differently? And then if it's for pay, maybe you ask around, 1 or 2 questions. So you might condense it down to like 5 questions, right? So take it, scale it up or down depending on how intense, versus like a, 4-day annual conference that's bringing in, 5,000 attendees. Like those are going to be different surveys and scales. Now, the last thing I'm going to hit on before we get deeper into the Q&A is going to be this high-low map. This is another way to me that you start tracking data and then create KPIs and dashboards that you can analyze year over year. Now, this is going to be going back to algebra. It's funny because I'm like, I never thought I would use it. And then there's 2 times in life where I actually feel like it helped me. This is one of them. But if you just think of a quick XY axis, I like to look at the effort versus the value. And now this goes for the meeting planners. This goes for the sales teams at our meeting sites, hotels, all that. Think about how valuable is this to your audience, to your customer. Now, again, they get to decide that, not you. But if you do that, 4-point scale or a 5-point scale, you can basically say, okay, 5 or 4 is at the very top, in the middle, and then the bottom would be 1. So if it's a 5-point, you got 2 in the bottom middle and 4 in the top middle. Or if you did a 4-point, then they're just above and below that middle line. But then also think of how much effort does this take you? So how much effort is it taking you as an organization, as a meeting planner, as an organization, an association, whatever, and give it a 5-point scale as well for effort, and then map those and start saying, okay, how valuable and how much effort. Now, here's what's going to happen. As you think of the different components, so maybe it's running some sponsored luncheons, and maybe it's the networking event, and maybe it's whatever the different components are. But as you look at those, you're going to start plotting them in here and saying, okay, this is where everything falls. And then based on that, you can start to make some more data-informed decisions. So the first quadrant would be your high value, low effort things that you offer as a part of the event. To me, those are things that you want to scale up. If it's easy and you've kind of got it on autopilot, you've got SOPs down, you've got templates down, or you're automating using technology for certain things, fantastic. Scale that baby up. That's going to help you with profitability because your people are willing to pay for it and you've got it down to a science. Now, if it's something that's high value and high effort, that's something that you want to consider being premium. That's where you want to decommoditize it, charge a bit more. So, for example, let's say that you're hosting an event and the keynote is going to give a lunch to, they're doing the keynote in the morning, but they say, hey, I'll do lunch as well with, 20 people and invite only, of course, and you pick the 20. That's something that's going to be high value, but more effort because you're putting a lot more work in. Like the keynote, you plan the room for all, let's say, 300 people or thousands of people. The lunch is only for these 20. Now, effort still might be a little lower, maybe a 3 or a 4, but it's still taking more work for less people, right? This is something that you would want to decommoditize. So either that's, to me, again, I'm giving the example where it's something you're probably already doing, but like you're getting how it fits into the map. That's something either where you charge a special ticket price or you only invite certain key accounts, people that you're also trying to, maybe win over a bit to upsell into other things. So that's where you don't offer it to everybody. Same with sponsored opportunities. You may have sponsors that say, hey, yeah, we're going to exhibit. Okay, great. It's taking maybe moderate effort. It's probably in the middle, but it's of value to them. Let's say you can fit 50 exhibitors or 10 exhibitors, whatever, but then you can only have 2 or 3 do a lunch, right? Where they privately invite people and give an extra presentation. That's something that's going to be a little bit more high value, high effort. So you charge more for that. Now, when you have low effort, low value, it doesn't mean you get rid of it. But the big thing there is you don't let it become high effort. These are the low hanging easy things. So when we're talking about like sponsorship, for example, because we can talk attendees and sponsors, to me, this third place would be like sticking their badge or their logo on things, shouting them out in email, social media. It's easy, doesn't take that much effort, probably not that valuable, but they're asking for it. Them exhibiting, moderate, low effort, of value for them. But then wanting to be a keynote or host a lunch or do a giveaway, like, have their book or something in all the attendee bags, that's something you charge higher for. And then similar for attendees, right? Like them coming in person, listening to the sessions, that's probably going to be right here. It's a value to them, low effort, you're doing it at scale. But if there's some VIP mentoring experience, special fireside chat, or more exclusive, like better seating, recordings, if you're going to record and give on-demand content after the event, that would go here. And then basic things like they're expecting food and beverage, they're expecting their badge, they expect to get into minimal things, that's going to go down here. Now, if something is high effort and low value, that's where you maybe want to sunset or stop doing that. That's where you review those KPIs and say, okay, can we either increase the value, because you have to move this in one of 2 ways. Either you're going to increase the value so it goes to the high value, high effort quadrant, or you're going to reduce the effort, automate, outsource something so it goes low effort, low value. But that's going to give you actual data to say, okay, what's working within the event that we deliver. So this is where, again, outside of software and what the dashboard, like, again, this is just something that I made up in Canva, and I usually do it in Canva for clients, or we'll do it in a Google Sheet so that we can share it and collaborate easily. If you invest in software, around registration, a lot of them should be able to do some of these things, but they won't do everything. So what are the things that you need to track that you can do on your own? So these surveys matter a lot. And then these high-low maps to me matter a lot. And you can even get more specific and nuanced. Instead of just doing one generalized high-low map, you could do it in aggregate for your event, but you could also break it down by attendee profile or organization based on how involved they are, and start to get different segments going of what is of value to them. So with that, what I want to kind of leave you with as we get ready to move into the Q&A section is when it comes to reviewing analytics and making KPIs to optimize your revenue, the 3 things to me that matter the most are the value that you're delivering, the price that you're setting, and therefore the profit that you can receive. If your value is not where it needs to be, That's the first thing to fix, not necessarily the price. You have to make sure that it is a viable product that you are giving to your audience, what attendees and or sponsors, if you have sponsors or exhibitors at your event. If it's just attendees, then them. Once that is set correctly, then you go, okay, now what's your willingness to pay for this experience? And you may even do an upgraded where you say, hey, here's the current event, and then we can do this upgraded VIP experience that might include these additional things. And would you be willing to pay more for it? If they tell you no, then the market's letting you know, is this a viable product or not? And if it's not, then you still have to stop. But if it is, then you continue. And then you say, okay, what's our profitability, right? How are we doing? A lot of organizations will do cost plus, but I like to call that our basement if we're thinking of a house. Cost plus is saying, okay, it's costing us, let's say $10,000 to put on this event, like a small event. We're going to have 100 people, so $100 each. We want to make a 20%, 30% profit margin. Let's set the price at like 125, 130, 150, and go for it. But that doesn't tell you what they're willing to pay, right? That's your basement. That's saying, okay, we need at least 100 to break even based on this many people attending. When you ask them willingness to pay, I can tell you if it is an event where I'm one of 1,000 people, but I'm just sitting in a room getting the same information, and the information's not really going to move the needle in my business, probably don't care. I'm not willing to pay as much. If you tell me that same event with 1,000 people is going to give me like a clear operations blueprint to build out SOPs and optimize efficiency within our business, and it really does that, and you have client testimonials from prior years saying, hey, by attending this conference, we were able to start saving 10, 20% of our staff time, became more efficient. And you have those quantitative stories and the qualitative of here's how it impacted us. Then what I'm thinking is, well, wow, that might save us, $50,000 a year in staffing because we can move it to other things. I'm willing to spend $10,000 now to go to this event versus $100. Like the value, think of our iPhones or Android, whatever team you are, they make those things for $200. They could just do cost plus and say, okay, we'll sell it at $300, have a 33% profit margin. No, I'm paying, $1,300, $1,500 for a new phone because of what it does for me. I can basically run my business from it, right? So how much more can you do for people? And then what are they willing to pay for that? That actual return on investment, that experience, what you're giving to them. Track that, track the value, the willingness to pay, and therefore your profit. That to me is how you're going to find success. So with that, I know we're going to move into Q&A. Two ways to connect really quick. One is on LinkedIn. I focus on associations, but I'm always willing to talk pricing events for profit or anyone else. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. Also, we have our book, as Pam mentioned, Pricing for Associations, but it includes a lot of event pricing templates. So even though you may not be in an association, we have the PDF for free on our website. So again, not a pitch. You can literally go to the link there, the book link, and download the book for free. So with that, I think I'm like 1 minute early, which is great for Run a Show. I always like being on time. So hey, Dee, so we can dive into Q&A.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for your time on behalf of the National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals. So just one quick question. You probably touched on it, but it's always good to have these reminders. Can you share with the audience, how they can take all of these tasks or just a little nugget that you think is beneficial for them to use in their everyday routine?
Yeah, I would say to me, the biggest one, because I think it's the foundation, would be how are you creating easy to look at dashboards based on the data that you already have, that you're already collecting. So I know sometimes we'll ask surveys. We look at it one time after the event, like 6 weeks after, but then we don't look at it again when we're planning the following year. Or sometimes we'll even, barely even look at it. I remember my association, we would look at the attendee stuff 6 weeks after and forget it. And then we also did speaker evaluations from the staff that were moderating in the room. We never looked at them. So we had people writing like red flag, don't invite this person back. They were just selling the whole time. And then they'd still come back. So I think actually using the data, figuring out, okay, again, are we doing it in Excel? We could have a fancy software, but are we looking at the data? If we're not, why not? Are we asking the wrong, do we even care about this? Like, what do we care about? Let's ask the right things and let's look at it and have continual growth on that. I think that's the starting point, is deciding what matters most and how do you collect it, gather it, and actually utilize it.
Okay. Looks like we don't have any questions in the chat just yet. So again, reminder, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. But just real quick, what do you think from your presentation would be a key must to have to share with our attendees today?
Yeah, I would say looking at profitability. I think that a lot of times we look at revenue. And with the events, it's a lot easier to look at profit. We usually track pretty darn well our costs against running the event. But I think really looking at the profit and then making strategic decisions on, is this worth continuing? Or if not, how can we reimagine it so that it is profitable for us? Or are we willing to lose profit? Are we in some other way making it up? Like maybe they're coming to the event and again, maybe then they're upselling into something else later, or paying for something else like a membership or something beyond. So there's ways to think about it, but to make that business decision of, does this even make sense?
Okay. Let's see. Oh, Travis has a question here.
Yeah.
Hello, Travis. He wants to know any recommendations for those managing event budgets as hotel event fees evolve almost daily, and how to account for those once budgets are set.
Yeah, that's hard. I think this is where negotiations really comes in. I think that I think a lot. I think that you have to know your position. How hard of a hitter can you be, right? Because there's other realities beyond just negotiating. There are some places that are just booked out, and they're in a great position to be able to say, "Oh well, if you won't, someone else will." I think AV costs are the main thing creeping up because we tend to book out so far in advance. The last minute's usually the AV. I've actually heard, which is interesting, like in discussion boards, this is anecdotal, so I don't have firm data here, but I've been hearing a lot from colleagues who are saying that getting outside AV has proved to be a better deal for them. But I know that can be quite the pain. And it depends on what you've already signed with the hotel if you're able to do that. But I do think, and I think also not being afraid to bring up, well, listen, here was the cost prior. I think because there's a delicate balance here. Our hotels lost so much revenue during COVID, and I know they're trying to make it up. So they're not the enemy, but if we also get charged so much, it no longer becomes feasible. So then the conversation is, well, you've outpriced us and now we can't run the event with you. So now you're losing business, and like the hotel's still going to lose business. The last thing I'll say there for negotiation is trying to do yes and. So instead of saying no, I try to positively frame. So for example, if someone says, hey, price went up, here, or we're taking this out. Instead of saying no, like we're not going to do that. Okay, yes, we can pay that. And, what more are we getting? So I think that's a fair question. And it can't just be, well, the cost went up. What more, again, value. So why has this gone up by 30%? What is beyond like, what is the value that you're throwing in? How do you justify this a bit? I think it's okay to ask those questions and to expect our salespeople to be armored with the right answers. So it is a bit hard. And also, again, just talk to colleagues, like knowing what they're doing, especially regionally. If you're within a region, that's really important. Okay, I see other questions coming in. So let me.
Yeah. So, and when you were speaking on the AV, just at the State of Black Tourism, Von Strickland with Alpha Phi Alpha used an example of how in the destination they were at this summer, the AV costs they got were extremely high. And so they did outsource that and ended up saving a lot of money, but also forged a long-term relationship with that AV individual for them to oversee the AV for their annual conventions in the future. So real quick, Tony wants to know, hey, Tony, what strategies are you seeing in the market that have been most effective?
Yeah, I think a few things. So as far as negotiating, again, I think some outside vendors is able. I think that helps. I think also partnering longer term. So if you can go to a location and say, hey, we will book out a bit further, but like, let's work on this. Let's build a partnership. If they're willing to, that's great. And then the other thing, as far as like maybe raising prices, is trying to anchor on like an early bird. So let's say if you offer an early bird and a regular, make the regular the early bird price the next year so you can keep going up. Like, we have to condition users, if they are paying to attend the event, that prices will go up, because it doesn't matter. Listen, like, just think, heck, I'm a millennial, right? I graduated college, I think, in 08. Just over the last almost 20 years, almost 20 years now, we've been through what, 2 recessions, housing, bubble, COVID, among other things politically. Money's going to change, right? Like, it's going to happen. So we have to condition people that prices will always go up. If we don't take small incremental steps, we're going to be way behind. And then when things like this happen, where AV does go up 30%, now it's like, well, how in the world do we catch up? Because we haven't been doing this. And I think that's especially important for like nonprofits or very mission-centered organizations. You still have to go up. You have to normalize that a bit. So I think that's important. I think that's important as well.
Last question. It looks like Tony has another question. This is going back to AV costs, because clearly it is a pain point for a lot of our planners. How do you, or have you used data to convince your stakeholders to upgrade technology to increase the revenue?
Yeah, I think so. I think that goes back into, well, a few things. One, I think that goes back into being willing to respectfully push back and just say, okay, what have the changes been since, this last price? Because if it's all in human capital and not in technology, then I think you have an angle there. That's also where price comping helps. So again, if you know either a traveling team or an outside that's local or whatever, to be able to say, well, here's what they're doing, here's the price, here's how many people we're going to have from them. That's one of the benefits of capitalism, is then you can kind of compare and benchmark and say, hey, we do have other options. So it helps keep things competitive enough. Again, the location can say, we don't care. And then you make a decision as an organization of, do you want to continue doing business with them? I know, we're all running businesses. We all have to be profitable. But at the same time, we also know that partnership and retention of customers matters more than winning a short game. Yeah. So I'm not saying stick it to anybody, because again, the hotels still need to be profitable, and they stayed afloat during a very rough economic time. But I think we can't use that excuse going into 25, 26. Like, it's bounced back pretty much. We're getting back. Like, we kind of need to move forward. And so I think it is normal to expect some validation of what are we getting, what's different. Are we getting more people on the ground? Are we getting better technology? Because if I see, respectfully, if I just see him sitting in the back drinking sodas and not being ready when I need something for AV, it's going to be a problem. But if it's top tier customer service, awesome, I love it, thank you. If I'm less stressed, that's a qualitative value proposition for me. If they are anticipating my needs, fantastic. So yeah.
Good deal. Well, one last thing, is there anything that you want to share before I make a couple of announcements with the group?
I would just say, if you guys, again, if you want to grab a copy of the book, go grab that at pricingforassociations.com/book. It's free. I think it'll be a great resource to have in your pocket. But otherwise, I just appreciate y'all having me today, and I wish you guys the best of luck as you're planning meetings and doing the excellent work. And thank you to NCBMP for having me today. It's been so great working with the team.
Awesome. So a couple of reminders. Those who are on their way out to Vegas, to IMEX, don't forget about the Profiles of Resilience speaker series that will be taking place on October 8th and the 9th at the Coalition booth. I think it is, don't have my readers, F as in Frank 622. And then also, please don't forget about our annual convention coming up November 13th through 16th. We're excited to be in Birmingham. So gather your friends and let's get ready to network. So again, Dr. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Sorry, Jason had to jump off. And Pam, so good to see you again a week later from us being in Kansas last week. So thanks everybody for attending.
Thanks.
All righty.
Bye.